Here's a sentence that sounds true and isn't. My dog trusts me completely. Look, it lets me rub its belly. That single behavior tells you almost nothing about trust. It might just mean your dog is comfortable enough, in this exact moment, to not worry about that one spot. Now, here's the sentence that's actually strange, and it's the one this whole video is built on. A dog can love you genuinely, measurably, chemically, and still not trust you. Not fully. And on the flip side, researchers have documented dogs that stay deeply attached to people who treat them badly. The bond doesn't break. So, if attachment doesn't require good treatment, and love doesn't require trust, what is trust, exactly? What is your dog actually measuring? That's what today is about, not a list of cute behaviors that supposedly prove your dog trusts you, but the actual science of how trust gets built, one reliable moment at a time, and how to tell it apart from something that looks identical, but isn't. By the end, you'll be able to watch your own dog and know the difference between attached to you and trusts you, and why that gap matters more than you think. This is PetMindlabs. Let's stop guessing and start seeing. Let's take the word trust off the shelf for a second, because in most dog content, it's used like a single glowing thing. You either have it or you don't. That's not how researchers who study attachment and social cognition treat it. They treat it as two different systems doing two different jobs. Attachment is the bond itself, the pull to be near a specific person, the distress at separation, the relief at reunion. It's largely automatic. It forms early, it forms fast. And this is the part people don't expect. It can form and persist, even when the relationship is bad. In human psychology, this is one of the most replicated findings in the entire field. Children form attachment bonds to caregivers who are inconsistent, neglectful, even outright frightening. The bond doesn't check the caregiver's resume first. It just forms, because forming it was the survival strategy every infant mammal inherited. Attachment answers one question: is this my person? Trust is different. Trust is a prediction. It's the running tally an animal keeps consciously or not of what happens when I depend on this individual. Trust asks a completely different question. Can I predict what this person will do? And is that prediction safe? Trust has to be built, behavior by behavior, because unlike attachment, it isn't automatic. It's evidence-based. Here's why that distinction matters for you, specifically, tonight. If you only understand attachment, you'll misread a lot of behavior. A dog can be completely attached to you, panicking when you leave, thrilled when you're back, and still flinch when you reach for its paw, still refuse to fully relax when you're in a bad mood, still hold something back. That's not a contradiction. That's two separate systems reporting two separate things. One is telling you, you're mine. The other is telling you, I'm still gathering data on you. And the reverse is just as real, maybe more important. Researchers who study attachment in maltreated children have a phrase for something that seems almost impossible. A bond can survive being unreliable. It happens in people. Every caseworker and child psychologist who has worked with kids removed from harmful homes will tell you the same thing. The child often still wants that parent, still watches the door for them. The attachment held on even when trust had every reason not to. It's one of the most studied, most uncomfortable findings in developmental psychology, and it exists because attachment evolved to keep infants near any available caregiver, not just good ones, because in the wild, no caregiver was infinitely worse than none at all. Now, does the same split exist in dogs? That's the actual question, not, does your dog love you? Which almost every video already answers. But what specifically does your dog's trust look like? How is it different from the love? And how would you know if it was missing? That's what the rest of this video is going to build, one study at a time. Let's start with the cleanest experiment on this, because it draws the line between attachment and trust almost by accident. In 2013, a team led by Lisa Horn at the University of Veterinary Medicine, Vienna, ran dogs through a manipulative problem-solving task, a toy that dispensed food, but only if the dog worked at it. Nothing emotional about the setup, just a puzzle and a stopwatch. They ran the dogs through it under different conditions: owner, absent; owner, present, but silent; owner, present, and encouraging. 20 dogs completed the first experiment. The result? Dogs worked at the puzzle significantly longer whenever their owner was in the room, whether the owner said a word or not. Owner absent versus owner present. P is less than 0.001. The mere presence of the owner changed how long a dog was willing to keep trying. That result alone sounds like a story about love. My dog just wants me near. But the second experiment is where it gets interesting, because this time they added a fourth condition. Instead of the owner, An unfamiliar person of the same gender sat in the room, silent, doing nothing threatening at all. 26 dogs went through this version. If what dogs needed was simply a calm human nearby, the stranger should have worked almost as well as the owner. It didn't. The paper's own language is blunt. The presence of an unfamiliar human did not increase their manipulation. The dogs kept trying longer with their owner in the room, even a silent one, but a harmless stranger sitting in the exact same spot did nothing for their confidence. When the researchers directly compared time spent near the silent owner versus the silent stranger, dogs stayed close to their owner significantly longer. P equals 0.009. The authors called this an owner-specific secure base effect, and they explicitly compared it to the bond an infant has with a specific caregiver, not caregivers in general. Read that carefully, because it's the whole thesis of this video in miniature. A stranger is a human. A stranger is, on paper, no more dangerous than the owner, but a stranger hasn't earned anything yet. There's no track record. And dogs, it turns out, don't extend the confidence-boosting effect to just anybody wearing skin. They extend it specifically to the individual whose behavior they've already had the chance to predict. Think about how strange that actually is, biologically. A stranger costs the dog nothing to be near, no history, no risk demonstrated, no reason for alarm. And yet a stranger's presence didn't buy the dog a single extra second of confidence. Only a specific track record did that. If attachment alone were doing the work here, you'd expect any calm, non-threatening person to produce at least some version of the effect comfort by proximity, not comfort by identity. It didn't happen that way. The dog's nervous systems weren't responding to, a safe-looking human is nearby. They were responding to, the individual I have data on is nearby. That's the signature of a trust system, not just a bonding system, and it's why this single study does more work than almost anything else in this video. That's your first real signal of trust, and it's almost invisible if you're not looking for it. Does your dog's confidence change specifically around you, not around people in general? Specifically you in a new or slightly stressful situation? That's not the same question as, does my dog get excited when I come home? It's, does my presence, specifically, make hard things feel more possible? That's a trust signal, not just an attachment signal, because it requires a track record to build. Here's the second layer, and it answers a slightly different question. Not, does my dog feel safer near me, but does my dog actually check with me before deciding how to feel about something new? This is called social referencing, and it's the same behavior a toddler shows when it looks up at a parent's face before deciding whether a stranger or a loud noise or a new toy is something to be afraid of. Isabella Merola and colleagues ran 2 versions of this study. In the first, published in Animal Cognition, dogs faced a mildly unsettling object, an electric fan with a ribbon tied to it, something dogs have never had a strong reaction to before, while their owner reacted to it with either a happy voice and face or a wary one. 83% of the dogs looked back at their owner's face after looking at the strange object. They were gathering information, not guessing on their own checking. The second version is the one that really separates trust from something more generic. This time, Merola's team split dogs into 2 groups. For half, the owner delivered the emotional message about the fan. For the other half, a stranger delivered the exact same message, same tone, same face, same words. Here's the nuance, and it's worth sitting with, because it's more honest than the simple version of this story. When it came to simply looking at the person's face for information, dogs did it with both the owner and the stranger. 76% with the owner, 60% with the stranger, and statistically, that gap wasn't significant. Looking for information is cheap. Any calm human's face will do in a pinch. But when it came to actually changing behavior based on what that person's message meant, approaching the fan faster after a positive message, staying away longer after a negative one, the gap opened wide. When the owner delivered a positive message, dogs approached and interacted with the fan dramatically more than when a stranger delivered the identical positive message. The difference was statistically significant. And in the clearest measure, dogs that actually touched the fan, it wasn't close. 8 dogs touched it after their owner's reassurance. 0 touched it after a stranger's. That's trust, isolated almost perfectly. Every dog in that room could look at a calm human face. Only the dogs being reassured by their own owner actually changed their behavior because of it. Attachment gets you the glance. Trust is what makes the glance mean something, what makes a dog willing to bet its own behavior on what your face is telling it. A stranger's calm face is data. Your calm face, if you've earned it, is instruction. And the same split shows up in reverse, on the fearful side of the experiment, which is the part most retellings of this study skip entirely. When the message about the fan was a warning instead of reassurance, dogs given that warning by a stranger camped out much farther from the fan, near the door, for far longer than dogs, warned by their own owner over 10 seconds near the exit versus around 5. Told to be afraid by someone with no track record, the dogs treated the whole room as suspect and stayed as far from it as they could get. Told to be afraid by their own owner, they still hung back, but noticeably less, as if the warning itself was trusted enough not to require maximum retreat. Fear transmitted by a stranger reads as, the whole situation might be dangerous. Fear transmitted by your own person reads as something narrower and more specific. This one thing needs caution, not abandon the room. That's not a small nuance. It means trust doesn't just make good news land harder, it also makes bad news land more precisely, instead of spiraling into blanket avoidance. There's a third layer to this, and it's the one that happens when your dog isn't performing anything at all, when it's unconscious. Sleep is, biologically speaking, the single most dangerous state an animal can enter. You can't watch for threats, can't flee, can't defend yourself. Every instinct an animal has says, only power down completely somewhere safe. A 2025 study used non-invasive polysomnography, the same category of sleep monitoring technology used on people to track dogs' actual sleep architecture, not just how long their eyes were closed. The researchers put dogs through nights in an unfamiliar environment under different conditions. Owner present, a friendly but unfamiliar person present, or alone. The dogs fell asleep faster with their owner there. Their sleep was more efficient, less tossing, less waking. And critically, they spent more time in deep, restorative, non-REM sleep, specifically when their owner was present, compared to sleeping near a friendly stranger or alone. Not a person. Their person. A friendly, harmless, unfamiliar human in the room did not produce the same depth of sleep. Think about what that actually requires, physiologically. Deep sleep isn't a light switch. It's the nervous system slowly standing down layer by layer, and it will only do that fully in an environment your body has decided is safe enough to risk. A dog sleeping lightly near a stranger isn't being dramatic. Some part of its threat detection system is still half online, still keeping half an ear on a person it hasn't finished evaluating yet. That's not fear in the alarming sense, it's just an unfinished trust ledger, showing up as a body that won't fully let go. The owner's presence didn't just make the dog feel comforted in some vague emotional sense. It changed a measurable, physical process happening in the brain, the same way it would in a person who can only really sleep deeply once they know, from experience, that nothing bad happens while they're unconscious around this particular human. Stack this next to the puzzle box study and the fan study, and a pattern starts to repeat itself so consistently it stops looking like coincidence. Confidence to explore. Owner-specific. Willingness to act on reassurance. Owner-specific. Depth of sleep in a vulnerable state. Owner-specific. 3 completely different labs, 3 completely different measurements, and the same shape keeps appearing. A stranger being calm and harmless is not the same currency as a specific person having a track record. Trust doesn't transfer to humans in general, just because one human earned it. It stays with the individual who built it. I want to stop here and do the thing most channels skip, because the real science is more careful than the highlight reel. Notice that in both of Merola's studies, dogs still looked at strangers' faces plenty. They still, in the pure do you glance at a person measure, didn't discriminate all that sharply between owner and stranger. The dramatic gap only showed up once real behavior was on the line, actually moving toward the object, actually touching. That's not a weakness in the research. It's the whole point, and it's something worth remembering before you go looking for proof your dog trusts you. Trust isn't a constant glow that lights up every interaction the same amount. It's specific to context and specific to stakes. Your dog might treat a friendly stranger's presence as perfectly fine for a casual sniff and greet, and still only take a real risk approaching something uncertain, staying calm during something uncomfortable when it's you standing there. Small, low-stakes moments don't separate trust from attachment very well. It's the higher stakes ones that do. Keep that in your pocket, because it's going to matter a lot in the practical section. Now here's where this gets genuinely important, and it's the part almost nobody says out loud in the pet content world. If trust is built from a track record, and attachment is closer to automatic, then a dog that has had a bad track record with humans should still be capable of forming an attachment bond, even to someone who hasn't earned trust yet. And if that's true, some of the most emotionally loaded assumptions about does my rescue dog really love me yet are built on the wrong question entirely. In 2021, A team led by Sarah Cimarelli at the University of Veterinary Medicine, Vienna, tested exactly this split. They compared dogs that had spent time in a shelter, meaning at some point they'd lost a home, and often had inconsistent or unknown histories before that, against dogs that had lived with one family their whole lives. 48 dogs total, 24 in each group. Every dog was tested with its current owner and with a stranger, using the same kind of problem-solving secure-based setup as the Vienna study you just heard about. The finding: former shelter dogs formed a secure base bond with their new owner just as strongly as the dogs who'd never been rehomed. History of instability didn't block them from building trust in a new, reliable person. What it changed was something else: how those dogs treated strangers. And in strangers, the effect wasn't there for anybody. Not the shelter dogs, not the lifelong family dogs. A person with no track record, whatever their history, doesn't automatically get the benefit of the doubt. Sit with what that actually means. It means trust in a dog isn't a fixed trait, my dog is a trusting dog, or my dog is a suspicious dog, as much as it's a relationship-specific measurement, built fresh, with each individual human, based on what that individual has actually done. A dog that came from a hard situation isn't broken. It's simply running the same evidence-based system every dog runs, just starting from a smaller sample size with you. Every calm walk, every predictable feeding time, every moment you didn't escalate when it would have been easy to, those are data points. The system doesn't care about your intentions. It counts your behavior. And now, the harder mirror of that same finding, the one this video opened with. If trust is built from a track record but attachment is closer to automatic, you'd expect to find bonds that survive bad treatment. And in the human research on attachment, that's exactly what's been documented, over and over, in some of the most cited work in developmental psychology. Children who are treated inconsistently or harshly by a caregiver don't stop being attached to them. Researchers even have a name for the resulting pattern disorganized attachment behavior that looks contradictory, pulled toward the person and braced against them at the same time. The child moves toward the caregiver for comfort and, in the same sequence, freezes, turns away, or braces, because the source of comfort and the source of fear are the same person. Individual studies on maltreated children have found disorganized attachment in the majority of cases in some samples. The large majority far more often than in children from stable, low-risk homes, and a large-scale synthesis pooling together. More than 50 separate studies confirms the direction is real and consistent. Maltreatment sharply raises the odds of this pattern, even after accounting for poverty and other hardships the family might also be facing. The exact percentage varies by sample and by how disorganization was measured, but the direction itself is one of the most consistently replicated findings in developmental psychology. The bond didn't require the relationship to be good, it just required the relationship to exist. I want to be precise here, because this channel doesn't borrow findings across species without saying so. Nobody has run the exact disorganized attachment protocol on dogs and published a matching number. I'm not going to hand you a fake canine percentage, but we do have the piece that matters for your dog specifically: separate research on training methods. In 2020, a team led by Ana Catarina Vieira de Castro studied 92 dogs across reward-based and aversive, punishment-based training programs. The dogs trained with higher proportions of aversive methods showed more stress behavior during sessions and a larger rise in cortisol, the stress hormone, afterward, compared to reward-trained dogs. What that study did not find, and this is the honest part, is those dogs abandoning their owners. They stayed. They kept living in that home, kept greeting that person at the door, kept showing every outward sign of attachment. What changed was measurable stress, and in related research on the same population, a less consistent pattern of secure attachment behavior specifically. The bond held. The trust readout looked different underneath it. That's the reframe, and it's not a comfortable one, but it's the honest one. Loving you and trusting you are not the same achievement, and you can't infer one from the other. A dog staying by your side proves the bond exists. It doesn't, by itself, prove the bond feels safe from the inside. And this is a good place to draw a hard line around what trust is not, because it's easy to blur it with two other things this channel has covered before. Trust is not the same as a dog reading whether a stranger seems safe in the moment. That's a real-time read of body language and behavior, built for people your dog has never met before, and it runs on completely different cues than a track record built over months. And trust is not the same as a dog having a single favorite person in a multi-person household that's about which specific relationship became the deepest one, not about whether the trust inside that relationship is fully built. You can be a dog's favorite person and still be someone it's actively learning to trust. You can be a stranger a dog correctly reads as calm and safe for the next 5 minutes, without that dog trusting you with anything that matters. 3 different systems, 3 different questions, and collapsing them into one word trust is exactly how the folk version of this topic goes wrong. So, if trust is a separate, buildable thing, how do you actually see it, and how do you build more of it? Here's what the research points to, organized by what's actually measurable, not by what feels dramatic. We open this video knocking down belly up equals trust as too simple, and here's why. Exposing the belly is one single data point in what should really be read as a cluster. The far more reliable trust signal is a dog that lets its whole body go loose and slow, specifically around you soft muscles, slower breathing, a willingness to be touched on paws, ears, or the belly without stiffening, especially compared to how that same dog behaves around someone it doesn't know well. The comparison is the test. A dog that's relaxed around everyone isn't showing you something special about your relationship. A dog that's only that relaxed with you is. Remember the puzzle box study. You can watch for this exact effect at home. Put your dog in a mildly new situation, a new room, a new object, a visitor's unfamiliar bag, and watch whether your presence specifically changes its confidence, compared to how it acts with that same novelty when a stranger, or no one, is nearby. If your dog explores more, hesitates less, and recovers faster from a startle when you're the one in the room, that's the owner-specific secure base effect showing up in real time. That's not neediness. That's your dog using you as a reference point it has earned the right to lean on. Remember the fan study's honest asterisk. Trust shows up where the stakes are, not in every casual glance. So don't test this with a treat on the floor. Test it in a moment that's mildly uncomfortable, a nail trim, a startling noise, a vet visit. Does your dog check your face? And does your calm reaction actually change its behavior? Does it settle faster because of what it read in you? That behavior change, not the glance itself, is the signal. A dog that looks at you but doesn't recalibrate is gathering information. A dog that looks at you and then visibly settles is trusting the information. Then bursts a second half to this same test, and it's the one people miss because it only shows up when things go wrong instead of right. If you ever need to react to something startling near your dog, you flinch at a loud noise, or your voice gets tense for a second, pay attention to how your dog reads that tension, not just whether it does. In that same fan study, dogs warned by a stranger treated the whole situation as suspect and retreated hard, camping out near the exit. Dogs warned by their own owner still pulled back, but noticeably less, like the caution applied to the one specific thing, not the whole room. So if your dog reads your own alarm and narrows its worry to whatever you're actually reacting to, instead of spiraling into avoiding everything nearby, that's trust doing precision work, not just volume. A dog that panics at your panic, broadly and indiscriminately, may still be reading you the way it would read a stranger as a general alarm, not as calibrated information. You already have the sleep study from the evidence stack. Here's how to actually use it. On a night with visitors, or in a new place like a hotel or a friend's house, notice where your dog chooses to settle first, and how fast it actually goes fully limp instead of dozing lightly with one ear up. A dog that picks a spot near you and drops into real, twitching, deep sleep within a few minutes is running the exact effect from that polysomnography study. Its nervous system decided your presence, specifically, was enough to power all the way down. A dog that stays light sleeping, startling at small sounds, even near you, may simply need more reps of "nothing bad happens here" before that system updates. If your dog came from a hard situation, or if your own relationship has had inconsistent moments, reactive corrections, unpredictable moods, anything that made your behavior harder to read, the Vienna shelter dog research is genuinely good news. Trust isn't capped by history. It's built the same way for every dog, starting from wherever the count currently sits. The mechanism that works is simple to describe and slow to execute. Predictability over performance. Not more affection, more consistency. Same responses to the same behaviors. No escalating corrections. Letting your dog control approach and retreat rather than forcing contact, this is the same principle used in trauma-informed handling protocols, sometimes called consent-based handling, where the dog gets to opt in rather than be grabbed. Every predictable, non-escalating interaction is one more data point in a system that, the research shows, keeps counting no matter where it started. Last one, and it's the one worth sitting with. If your dog stays close to you, greets you, follows you but tenses up, avoids being handled, or doesn't show the confidence transfer effect from tip 2, don't assume the attachment means the trust is automatically there too. That gap is exactly what the research on inconsistent treatment predicts. The bond can hold while the trust reading stays low. The fix isn't guilt. It's the same mechanism as tip 5, predictability, patience, and letting the evidence accumulate on the dog's own timeline, not yours. One last practical warning, because a certain kind of viral content likes to encourage this, and it's a bad idea. Don't manufacture a fake threat, a scary noise, a fake grab, a food bowl you snatch away as a test to see whether your dog panics or stays calm. If trust really is a running tally of reliable evidence, then deliberately staging an unreliable moment is a withdrawal from that account, not a measurement of it. Every genuine, boring, predictable interaction is a deposit. A stage scare is a withdrawal dressed up as a quiz. If you want to know where the count currently stands, watch for the signals in tips 1 through 4 during real life. Don't manufacture a crisis to check the balance. Here's what I want you to carry out of this video. Your dog loving you was never really in question. Attachment is close to automatic, and it happens fast, and it can survive far more than it should have to. But trust is the harder, slower thing underneath it. It's not a feeling your dog decided to have about you on day one. It's a number your dog has been quietly keeping every predictable meal, every calm reaction, every moment you didn't escalate when you could have added up, one small piece of evidence at a time, until the sum was large enough to lean on. That means trust isn't something you're owed just because you feed and house an animal. And it isn't something you've failed at just because your dog still flinches sometimes, or came from somewhere hard, or hasn't fully let its guard down yet in every single situation. It means the count is still running, and every ordinary, boring, predictable moment you give your dog is quietly adding to it, whether you notice or not. So here's what I'd love to know. Think about your own dog for a second. Is there a specific situation where you can actually see the difference between attached to me and trusts me completely? Tell me what it is in the comments. There's no wrong answer. I genuinely want to read them. If this changed how you're going to watch your dog this week, subscribe, because that's the whole mission at PetMindlabs. We take the real research and turn it into something you can actually see happening on your own living room floor, instead of another list of cute behaviors with no science behind them. Next time, we're going to look at whether dogs actually get jealous and what's really happening underneath it. I'm glad you're here. This is PetMindlabs. Stop guessing. Start seeing.